I want to welcome Ganesh Iyer, who is the CEO of Mphasis, an IT services company, and also Jerry Wind, who is a Wharton marketing professor. Thank you both for joining us for this discussion about how CEOs and other top leaders can nurture a digital culture in their organization. And the first thing I wanted to ask you about that is, as leadership, CEOs in particular, become more digitally transformed themselves, then one of the next things that they have to look at is how do you move this down the organization. So what does smart leadership look like as it tries to move the digital transformation down through the organization? And Ganesh, maybe we'll start with you.
See, any transformation, the physical transformation is an easier bit, because you draw up a new chart, new reporting lines, new incentive scheme. So that's the physical transformation. The challenge lies in chemical transformation of the company. How do you rewire the people? How do you equip them with new skill sets which are required in the new world? How do you actually walk the talk? Because, for example, when a company which is in analog business also aspires to get into digital business, cannibalization is inevitable. And as a CEO, do you go and say, you do something different and say something different? So authenticity of leadership becomes important. So in my company, the mantra which we have adopted, make customer central to our transformation and revolve around customer strategy to be successful. So one of the things which we have started measuring is, are we becoming more relevant to our customers? Everybody talks about the fact that this customer is relevant to me. Is that important from business perspective? What is more important is, are you relevant to the customer? Because that gives you sustainability and longevity, and it actually defines whether you are delivering value. So that's how we are keeping customer central theme to our transformation. We are focusing more and more on chemical transformation. And earlier, Jerry and I were discussing where is our operational headquarters. One of the things which we are working on is making trenches as our headquarters. So where the customer is, you just go there and action around those things. So those are the elements which I would define as elements which we are working on for transformation. And you need to be ruthless with corporate antibodies, because in any transformation, you face corporate antibodies. One needs to be just ruthless about it.
Jerry, what's your view on what does smart leadership look like once the leadership has transformed themselves to think digitally, and now they want to make their company's culture more innovative?
Well, I fully agree with your comments. I thought we're right on target. Let me take them a little kind of one step further in the following sense. One, it's absolutely critical that the leaders understand the digital world and practice it, but it's not enough. That's a necessary but not sufficient condition. I think the sufficient condition is to move back to the next step and basically saying, but what are the implications to our mental models? What are the implications to our business models? And basically willing to make the tough decision, have the courage to make the tough decisions, which require basically we have to face the new reality of digital world. And we finished a study which I think you're familiar with, which was basically showed that there are 4 types of business models. There are basically asset builders, there are service providers, there are technology makers, and there are network orchestrators. Network orchestrator will be the Uber, the Airbnb, the Visa, MasterCard. The market return, market value on these 4 business models vary dramatically. So if you look at the market value as a multiple of revenue, you find out that for manufacturer, asset builder, it's 1 to 2. For service providers, 2 to 3. Technology makers, about 4. If you're a network company, it's about 8 plus. To become a network company with the enormous benefits there, like zero marginal cost that you have associated with this ability to scale infinitely and the like, you need a different type of mindset. You basically have to have, as the leader, you have to change basically your mental model, you have to change the business model, move more toward the network, and you have basically to start realizing that it's no longer the command and control type leadership. Basically, you have to basically become much more a co-creator. And we look at the leadership required for a network orchestrator to be co-creator with the customers and others. Think about what Apple has done with the ecosystem of Apple. There is no way they could have had the hundreds of thousands of app dev out there internally. They had to basically create it. And you have to have a culture of a win-win and being willing to share with the customer. So I will take it one step further in terms of your comment on the customer. It's not only how important you are to the customers, but change the relationship as opposed to just looking me and the customer. How can we create now a new entity, which is how do we co-create together? What is the role of the customer in co-creating? And if you really move to the co-creation and everyone in the organization starts getting the culture of co-creation and a truly win-win, I think then you are on the way toward winning in this transformation.
Absolutely brilliant point. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned it. We set up a lab called Next Labs because in Mphasis the logo is Unleash the Next. So we thought Next Labs would be a good name for our labs. And the fundamental principle of that lab is co-creation. If you are creating something on your own that is less acceptable to us as an investment, it is more acceptable to us when you are co-creating it with the customer. We are willing to make more investment in that area than you have one bright idea and I'm going to try it out. Mm-hmm. So it's such a great point you have made. I completely acknowledge.
Which is a good lead-in from both of you to the next question, which is how does leadership, starting with the CEO, embrace this idea of being more collaborative? This egalitarian environment that we're talking about where you get immediate customer feedback. So you know what they're thinking really fast. You have to respond fast. And how do corporate cultures change to accommodate that? Ganesh.
Actually, quite a thought-provoking question. It goes back to the fact that you have to come to terms with the fact that CEO doesn't have monopoly on all the great ideas. In fact, probably he's the worst person to have great ideas. And a new person who is serving the client, youngster who has just joined the company, may have a great idea. So you really need to move from being a large boat or a large ship to 1,000 canoes, where they are governed and they are empowered to make choices. And that change is not easy. I mean, these concepts are easy to describe. We are in the midst of trying to do it. Even when you go to someone and says you are empowered to make the decision, suddenly they have been demanding that empowerment, and the moment you give it, they are at a loss how to use it. They go back to the old habit of saying that let me check with my boss before I make a decision. So these concepts will take time to be ingrained in the company. One needs to be patient. It cannot be a 2-minute noodle kind of an approach. It is something which you have to be staying with it. I need to get comfortable with it because in my last 30 years, there are lots of things which are within my muscle memory, which are based on command and control, hierarchy, the ego of being a CEO, the glamour of being a CEO. You have to be prepared to take the shine off yourself and reach out to people who can bring these ideas. So those are all the cultural changes, authority changes, model changes that we are making. We are also making incentive changes. We are redefining the incentive as if we have multiple CEOs in the company, so it becomes self-governing, motivated team. Some of the ideas are here. I wouldn't say that we have reached the destination or we have arrived. We have made progress. We have still some ways to go.
Jerry, this idea about flattening the organization that's being talked about here, what's your advice to companies on how they should change their culture to, as he says, one thing to say it, another thing to live it?
First of all, congratulations on what you're doing. I think they're absolutely the right track. There's a lot of things we can talk about. I'll give you two things. I'll give you one, a change in mental model, and one, I'll give you something very practical that every company should do. Then we can elaborate more. The change in mental model is the concept of control. Most companies believe that they have control. The reality is that, let's take, for example, positioning of a brand. The reality is that the positioning of a brand is determined by the consumers, not by the company. So as long as you as a company, as a leader, believe that I have control, I decide on the positioning, you in reality have zero control. If you change the Mel Mile to a collaborative, co-creating Mile, you realize from day one that the control is shared between you and the customer. And therefore, you're not under this illusion that you're doing something, but the market in reality is really totally different. So I think it's absolutely that the change to a co-creation Mile is absolutely critical here. Now, in terms of pragmatics, in terms of how do we make it happen, I am a great believer in experimentation. And I think if a company will adopt the philosophy of adaptive experimentation, they'll be able to achieve basically a lot of things. Because the advantage of experimentation, it's the only way of determining causal relationship. It is the only way that forces you actually to measure and know exactly what's happening, what is the result of whatever you're doing. The most important thing, it encourages you to take basically more innovative initiative as opposed to just me too or a little smidgen improvement in what you're doing. And fundamentally what's happening, the minute you adopt a philosophy of experimentation throughout the company, you, the CEO, send a message to the company it is okay to fail. Because everyone knows not every experiment will succeed. And the minute you send a message, it's okay to fail, you're overcoming this kind of the natural inclination to be risk averse. The minute you send this, then you have to link it with what you were talking about, which is the incentive system and the reward system. So you want to celebrate lessons from failure. So you're not celebrating only the successes, but what have we learned from something that did not work? And if you are then adapting basically the adaptive experimentation, which says there is no fixed strategy. Basically, everything we do is experimentation. We finish experiment 1. The question is, okay, what have we learned from here? We move into experiment 2, experiment 3, 4. It's a culture of experimentation as the new basically mental model for running a business, which is ideal for a distributed type organization because they're not centralizing it. The only thing centralization we want to do is perhaps in terms of creating meta-analysis of the many, many experiments, providing like master designs, encouraging, and if you're moving into areas such as cognitive computing with Watson, or you're moving into what Google is doing with primarily with Digital Mind in terms of the AI, and you have an AI or cognitive computing master system out there that basically will take all the results of the experiments plus all the other data out there, now you're basically a game changer. But every unit in the organization feel empowered because they're providing you the key ingredient for the decision that you can then make based on all of these together.
It's interesting what you said about you have to sort of erase that fear of failure. It just reminds me of an analog example. Recall the Japanese remaking manufacturing during the 80s and 90s, and one of the things they would say is that when a part went wrong on the line or something went wrong, that was to them that was a jewel. It was a treasure because they could look at that and figure out not just what went wrong for that, but they could figure out ways to do lots of other things better. So it's an interesting parallel. I wanted to just dig into the customer centricity idea a little bit because it makes sense. Put the customer at the center, and you'll be okay. But I'd like to hear from each of you. What does that look like? What does customer centricity look like in a company? How do you nurture it? How do you encourage it? And what does it mean? Is it you have to understand exactly what they're thinking? Tell me what customer centricity looks like.
So in our case, when you look back at offshore players, we were focusing on IT services, which meant you were calling on the chief information officer and procurement side majority of the time. As the world transforms to digital, the decision around digital will get made in the business side of things. So if you want to be relevant in the context or customer centricity in the digital world, you need to spend time understanding customer's customer and not just the customer. And that's the journey that we have been tracking for the last 18 months as a company. How do we understand deeper in customer's customer? Now, many of our customers are both in B2B and B2C. And you would see digital playing a bigger in B2C. So even making that distinction, when you think of a customer as one company logo, it's not true. They are made up of multiple businesses. Their competition is different. Challenges are different. Opportunities are different. As you get deeper and as you become a trusted advisor to business, that results in centricity. We have some cultural challenges. Let me bring up those cultural challenges as well. By nature, people don't ask questions. They don't challenge. So you have to kind of ensure that people challenge, people add value, they ask questions. Because it's not just doing what they ask you to do. It is also about bringing best practices based on your knowledge and experience and challenging status quo. So it's not just about serving what they want, but focusing on what they need. And that distance is truly the distance that we are trying to cover. So our customer centricity is being defined by, I made some changes and we are transforming around 16 customers right now. Because I'm not big enough to lead market transformation. I don't have the wherewithal to lead market transformation. So my transformation is linked to my customer's transformation. And hence, I take responsibility for select customers. I saw some of the experiment which people do where they go to retail shop and the CEO serves there to understand the customer. I'm not in that kind B2C business. But I spend time, as I mentioned earlier, in trenches to understand what's going on. How can I add value? So those are the best way to define customer centricity is understand customer's customer.
Jerry.
Well, first, I fully agree. Basically, since you're in the B2B world, basically, you have to develop dual strategy. You have, for every one of your B2B customers, you have to develop strategy for their B2Cs. So help them. So basically, you cannot, if you're in the B2B game, you cannot just limit yourself to the B2B space. You have to understand the B2C aspect. But let me give you kind of 3 criteria that I will bring for the customer centricity. One of them relates to the fact that you realize that the customer is becoming now the active participant in the system. So co-manufacturing. Think about Build-A-Bear. The customer builds the product, not the factory. Think about Facebook, co-creation. All them, Facebook provided a platform. All the content that Facebook has created by customers. Think about pricing, Priceline.com. The customer decides what is the price. Think about distribution. Why do I have to have my salespeople here? Think about diapers.com, where primarily because of the incentive they provided for every customer to bring other customers and benefit for both of them, the customers became the salespeople for the company. So stop thinking about you are doing things as a company. Create a platform to allow your customers to do things. So that's number one. If you're doing this, you're really way, way ahead in becoming really customer-centric. Second, you realize the fact that if you work, especially in the B2B world also, but true also in the B2C, if you work together as a co-creation with the customer, you really understand the needs of the customer. It's typically when we talk about understanding customer, the typical company will say, okay, we'll do marketing research. Market research gives you almost, in most cases, wrong information. Because first it gets tons of people are not responding to this. If a huge non-response bias, typically you're running in terms of structured internet panels, which most people are kind of basically not really responding, and structured questions. Tons of problems with market research. There are some good market research projects, and we've been using them, but primarily you'll get by far more reliable and valid data if you get it through the interaction of co-creating with the customer. And 3, I think you should change the measures. You should start thinking about not market share, but think about share of wallet. What is my share of the total requirement of this customer? So if you look at the Infosys, they should look at this basically in terms of what share they have of the total computing expenses of their clients as a measure. Think about lifetime value of a customer. Start thinking about different measures that focus on the customer, because most of the measures today are not customer-centric. In reality, the tragedy is, in terms of financial accounting, customers are not even financial accounting, don't count anything. Actually, the financial accounting, the chair on which you're sitting is worth more than you, because you're not even financial accounting, but the chair is there as an asset. So change the measures.
How does it make you feel?
Small. I feel very small right now.
Change financial accounting.
Okay, well,
The next revolution.
thanks for joining us, both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.